Microsoft cracks down on Windows local accounts, but there's already a bypass. Minority Report is becoming real, as most good sci-fi does at some point, and some good news on the Apple iCloud backdoor court case, and much, much more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 221, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past 2 weeks. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
And our sponsor this week is SimpleX Chat. For those who don't know, SimpleX is one of the newer messengers on the privacy space, but they are really doing a lot of innovative things. They are security and privacy first, end-to-end encrypted. They have no unique identifiers. There's no phone numbers. There's no usernames. They don't require anything on sign-up, not even an email address. They are open source. They have been audited. They are decentralized. Users can even spin up their own servers if you want to. They are cross-platform on iOS and Android. They are also on alternative app stores like F-Droid, and you can even direct download with an APK or obtain. And they also have desktop releases that are in beta. They have a real focus on community features like large groups, files, and media sharing. The goal that they're going for is to offer features from messengers like Telegram and WhatsApp and, of course, Signal, but they're trying to iterate on that and provide even more privacy and security. And we do have a business address. If you're looking to try it out and test it out, you can shoot us a message, ask us a question or something. That's not part of the Q&A for the record. Just as a quick mention, we do actually have a private group on SimpleX for patrons as well. So if you are a patron who has not signed up for that yet, or if you were thinking about joining Patreon and you want to try SimpleX, that could be a good perk right there. It's really important to us and the SimpleX team that we don't oversell a product. It's just worth noting that they put a lot of emphasis into making sure that they have a good foundation on privacy and security. They're still doing a lot of rapid development, so they are still adding in mainstream features and user interface stuff that you would normally find in other more mainstream messengers. This might be a tough sell for your friends and family. Just keep that in mind. You know, different tools have different use cases. We are still grateful for their support, and we do still think, again, they're doing some really cool and innovative things, so definitely check them out, especially if you are still looking for an encrypted messenger that meets your needs. It might be what you're looking for. Thanks again to them, and we appreciate their support. All right, that'll take us into our highlight story this week, and we're going to talk about Windows 11. Now, this is a little bit of an older story because last week our schedules kind of didn't really match up and we weren't able to record, but there is actually some news here that I haven't heard covered on other podcasts. So part one of this story is that the new Windows 11 build makes mandatory Microsoft account sign-in even more mandatory. Microsoft has released a new Windows Insider build of Windows 11 to its experimental dev channel with a fairly extensive batch of new features and tweaks, but the most important one for enthusiasts and administrators is buried halfway down the list. This build removes a command prompt script called bypass NRO, which up until now has been a relatively easy and reliable way to circumvent the otherwise mandatory Microsoft account sign-in requirement on new Windows 11 PCs and fresh installs of Windows 11 on existing PCs. They said that they are removing this script to enhance security and user experience. This change ensures that all users exit setup with internet connectivity and a Microsoft account. The article goes on to say there are still a few relatively easy workarounds to the account requirement, as detailed in our extensive post, which this is a link to that in the article, about removing cruft from a fresh Windows 11 install. But the bypass NRO command had the benefit of being relatively easy to explain and of working equally well for both the Home and Pro editions. The command will continue to work in the current stable versions, including the 24H2 update from late last year. This change has only been made in the Insider Dev Channel build of the operating system, which is generally where Microsoft tests less stable features. So part two, which this came out just a few days later, says new Windows 11 trick lets you bypass Microsoft account requirement. So last week, at the time this article was written, Microsoft removed the bypass NRO command, which we just talked about. On Saturday, an ex-user shared a much easier way to bypass Windows 11's Microsoft account requirement, which Bleeping Computer has confirmed to work. When you install Windows 11 and you reach the screen asking let's connect you to a network, you press Shift and function 10 on the keyboard to open a Windows command prompt. At this point, you type ms-cxh:/local only, and that is in the article, of course. Press enter, and then it will open a Microsoft account window where you can create a new local user for the install. After filling in the information and clicking next, the setup will continue. However, now it will continue using your local account and will not prompt you to use a Microsoft account. When we hear things like this, we think this is a constant cat and mouse. So they do address that. They say whether Microsoft will remove this command from Windows in the future is too early to tell. However, as the command appears to be more tightly integrated into the operating system rather than just a script, it will likely be harder to remove. So that is good news. So my thoughts here, I think Microsoft is mostly full of crap when they say like, oh, this is to enhance security and user experience. They're not entirely full of crap because, you know, we did cover cover a story about how, and I think the article even mentioned how Microsoft has made it where now when you have a Microsoft account, you automatically get Windows encrypted with BitLocker, which, considering most people are not going to go out of their way to use what's it called?
Veracrypt.
Yes, thank you. Veracrypt. It's on the tip of my tongue. Because most people are not going to go out of their way to use that. For those who are, please do. I think it's superior to BitLocker just based on a lot of the stories I've read and for, the fact that it's open source. But considering most people aren't going to do that, I do think that is a general overall win for users. But of course, we also think there's a lot of privacy concerns with a Microsoft account. Like Windows is already very noisy, submits a lot of data, submits a lot of telemetry, a ridiculous amount of telemetry. And adding a Microsoft account into that just makes it even worse. So anything we can do to make Windows a little less crappy, because I already know in the comments, people are saying, just install Linux. And like, yes, I'm with you. I use Linux every day, but there are valid reasons to be on Windows. It's better for gaming. There's certain software that might only work on Windows. Maybe you don't have access to a machine that can dual boot. There's so many reasons why somebody might still be using Windows that are perfectly valid. They may not be happy about it, but they are where they are. We're not fans of this. I'm really hoping this new MSCXH local only, I really hope that command stays around, because I think it's kind of crap that Microsoft won't give you that freedom to use your device the way you want to. And it's also like really alarming. Like there's just so many perfectly reasonable situations where you may not have internet connectivity and Microsoft is giving you a middle finger. I'm not happy about them constantly trying to do away with local accounts, but it's good that we have this workaround and hopefully it will stick around.
I'm actually getting really frustrated by this. I mean, Microsoft has been doing this for a long time now, but what really frustrates me is that the amount of times they try to do stuff and the fact there's a cat and mouse game normalizes this. And I want to remind people, like, okay, everyone close their eyes who's listening. I'm going to describe a company that cares all about a walled garden, getting you into an ecosystem, and that is what they're going to do at all costs. What comes to mind?
Apple.
You can use macOS perfectly fine without an account. You lose access to the App Store and iCloud, but you can still download all your software. You can set it up without an account. I don't think you need an internet access to set up a Mac. Even Apple, who, like, based on that description I just gave you, doesn't do this nonsense. It's just Microsoft who's trying to do this. So this is a very unique thing that Microsoft is doing. Both macOS and Linux don't do it. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple does do it later on. Like, I'm not saying they're not doing that. It's just right now they don't. I really hate how this goalpost keeps moving and how every time they change it a little bit and people bypass it, it just reinforces that this is going to be expected behavior on a desktop operating system. The most popular desktop operating system, actually. So I'm really annoyed by it, and I hope that it doesn't give Apple ideas, and I don't think it'll give Linux ideas. But I made a little joke on our forum recently that it's almost like Microsoft is trying to get people to like move away from Windows. It's like they're doing everything possible, and I know Nate's about to touch on recall coming back as well, which just feeds back into that theory. So those are all my thoughts. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking, it's like, I've never met anybody who was like a Windows fan. When you were talking about Apple just now, like I met people who are like, no, I like Apple. I think they make good products. I like their software. It's very intuitive. It looks nice. And I've met people who are like, I don't like Apple because they're expensive, or, I don't like their walled garden or whatever. But I've never met anybody who was like, no, man, I love Windows. Like Microsoft is awesome. They make the best products. Like I'm such a Microsoft fanboy.
And I don't think anyone would have issues saying like, okay, let's say you're walking down the street and oh my God, you got locked into a garden. You're in a walled garden. Are you going to pick Apple or Microsoft's garden? Like, who in their right mind is going to pick Microsoft? Like, please, if you pick Microsoft, please let me know why. Because all I hear about is people complaining about Teams, people complaining about frickin' Outlook, people complaining about the entire, like, SharePoint, like, the whole, like, enterprise ecosystem. My point is, don't validate Microsoft for doing this because you don't want to be in Microsoft's ecosystem. If you're using Windows, you're probably still trying to actively avoid every Microsoft product on Windows. Like you're probably trying to avoid Edge, you're probably trying to avoid their gaming stuff, you're probably trying to avoid like OneDrive. Who uses OneDrive? Come on. My point is, I don't think many people love Windows, and if you do, you're valid to have that opinion, but I think you're in the minority. Like people do not like this stuff. So I don't know why people are tolerating it. And frankly, I don't think many people are. This seems to be a universal, this sucks kind of thing. And I'm glad that people can unify over that.
Yeah. And then just real quick, Henry mentioned, I don't even feel like this is a story worth making a big deal out of, but just to throw it out there for you guys, recall is coming again. We've known it's coming. They announced it. Nobody liked it. All the cybersecurity experts poked massive holes in it. They delayed it so they could fix the holes. which sounds like they've improved it a little bit, but even still, nobody asked for this. But yeah, it's coming. Allegedly, you're going to be able to turn it off. But, we were just talking trash about Microsoft. How long before you can't turn it off? Very troubling, but it is coming soon. So if you are a Windows user and you're forced into that ecosystem, be sure to shut it off as soon as it rolls out. If you're not a Windows user, be grateful. I'm not going to say point and laugh because, again, I think there's plenty of perfectly legitimate reasons somebody's stuck on Windows. But, just sit back and be like, thank God I'm not.
All right, and now the data breaches. Since we have 2 weeks, we have a lot of data breaches, so we're going to do what we normally do, which is we'll cover about the first 4 or 5 major ones, and then we'll just give you the headlines for the rest, but you can always check the show notes to get all the details. So the first data breach is from US lab testing provider, which exposed health data of 1.6 million people. This is called LSC, which is Laboratory Services Cooperative, and they're a Seattle-based nonprofit. And what they do is they provide centralized lab services to members, including Planned Parenthood centers. So this data breach impacts mostly people who had lab tests done, and this occurred in October of 2024, and the data stolen varies from person to person, but it includes full name, social security numbers, driver's license and passport numbers, date of births, government-issued ID, date of service, diagnoses, treatments, lab results, provider, facility details, insurance plan type, insurer, member group ID, number claims, billing details, bank and payment card info. This is one of those data breaches that I would have to put together and think of what wasn't leaked.
Okay, while Henry was talking, I apparently forgot that I can't breathe water, so I apologize if my voice is weird now. But our next data breach is for the Australians. Australian pension fund hit by wave of credential stuffing attacks. Reuters has learned from a source familiar with the matter that over 20,000 accounts were breached in this massive wave of attacks targeting Australia's superannuation industry, with some members reportedly losing some of their savings. Since the weekend attacks, some of the country's largest funds, with millions of members each and managing tens or hundreds of billions, including Australian Super, Host Plus, Rest, and Australian Retirement Trust, and Insignia Financial, confirmed that some of their members' accounts were breached in these attacks.
T-Mobile kind of screwed up on this one. So they showed the users' names, pictures, and exact locations of random children. Some context here. T-Mobile sells a small GPS tracker for parents called Sync Up, which they can use to track locations of children who don't have cell phones. So Jenna was a parent who uses this Sync Up to keep track of her 3-year-old and 6-year-old. Jenna logged in Tuesday, and instead of seeing her 3-year-old and 6-year-old child had left school, oh, so I guess they went to school, I see. They were shown the exact real-time locations of 8 random children around the country, but not the locations of her own kids. So 404 Media agreed to use a pseudonym for Jenna to protect the privacy of her kids. She said, "I'm not comfortable giving my 6-year-old a phone, but he takes a school bus, and I just want to be comfortable to see where he is in real time. I had put a 500-meter boundary around his school, so I get an alert when he's leaving." Jenna sent 404 Media a series of screenshots that show her logged into the app, as well as the locations of children located in other states. In the screenshots, the address level location of the children are available, as is their name and the time of the location that it was updated. In many cases, the location updated time said just now or 1 minute ago. It is clear the tracked people are children because their profile pictures show images of young kids wearing backpacks, and many of the locations shown are schools around the country. Jenna's also not alone. On Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook, parents say they were also shown the locations of random people instead of their children or partners.
So we're going to try and blow through the rest of these data breaches because there's literally 10 more of them, and we don't want a 2-hour podcast. So I guess I'll go ahead and just take the first 5, and Henry can take the second 5. So the first headline says, kink and LGBT dating apps exposed 1.5 million private user images online. The next one comes from the UK. Royal Mail investigates data leak claims, no impact on operations. After that, we have the Texas State Bar is warning of a data breach after INC ransomware claims attack. Europcar GitLab breach exposes data of up to 200,000 customers, and API testing firm APISec exposed customer data during security lapse.
Food giant WK Kellogg discloses a data breach linked to Clop ransomware. Western Sydney University has disclosed a security breach. An AI image generator's exposed database reveals what people really used it for. It is not good. Oracle privately confirms cloud breach to customers, which is an update to a recent story. And the last one is Port of Seattle says ransomware breach impacts 90,000 people, and it's an update from August 2024. So those are our data breaches for the week.
All right, that'll take us into the companies, and we'll start with, this is kind of a big story, just to kind of keep you guys in the loop. So this whole 23andMe thing. So the headline comes from the FTC, and it says 23andMe buyer must honor firm's privacy promises for genetic data. I mean, this was Ars Technica, but They're saying the FTC is saying this. So the chairman, Andrew Ferguson, said that he's keeping an eye on 23andMe's bankruptcy proceeding and the company's planned sale because of privacy concerns related to genetic testing data. 23andMe and its future owner must uphold the company's privacy promises, Ferguson said in a letter yesterday to representatives of the U.S. Trustee Program, a Justice Department division that oversees administration of bankruptcy proceedings. Ferguson's letter points to several promises made by 23andMe and says that these pledges must be upheld. Quote, the FTC believes that, consistent with Section 363, subsection B, subsection 1 of the Bankruptcy Code, these types of promises to consumers must be kept. This means that any bankruptcy-related sale or transfer involving 23andMe users' personal information and biological samples will be subject to the representations the company has made to the user about both privacy and data security, and which users relied upon in providing their sensitive data to the company. Moreover, as promised by 23andMe, any purchaser should expressly agree to be bound by and adhere to the terms of 23andMe's privacy policies and applicable law, including as to any changes it subsequently makes to those policies, unquote. Ferguson said that he is, quote, pleased to see, unquote, that 23andMe has indicated since its bankruptcy filing that it will continue to honor its privacy promises. But the letter serves as a reminder that the FTC can take action when the companies fail to live up to their promises. Just how active Ferguson will be in the 23andMe bankruptcy process isn't clear. President Trump has attempted to limit FTC authority by issuing an executive order declaring that it and similar agencies are no longer independent and must be supervised by the president.
So iOS 18.4 includes a new location services privacy setting for your iPhone. You can find this new setting by going into Settings, Privacy and Security, Location Services, and then System Services, and scrolling down to the Product Improvement section. The Improve Location Accuracy toggle joins the existing iPhone Analytics, Routing and Tracking, and Improve Maps. Apple's documentation for this new setting reads your iPhone will periodically send the geotagged locations of nearby Wi-Fi hotspots and mobile phone masts in an anonymous and encrypted form to Apple to be used for augmenting this crowdsourced database of Wi-Fi hotspots and mobile phone locations. Mobile phone mast locations, I should say. This sounds like it controls whether your device contributes to the assisted GPS system, which combines reading from GPS satellites. Turning off improved location accuracy does not mean your device cannot benefit from the crowdsourced database. One more quick story, and this one actually impacted me. There is a weird iOS 18.4 bug, which randomly installs apps you've previously downloaded. According to the article, sometimes it will download new apps that you've never downloaded. Anyway, it's weird, and I just wanted to say that if this happened to you, it is an actual bug.
Madison Square Garden's surveillance system banned this fan over his t-shirt design. So a concert at New York's Radio City Music Hall was a special occasion for Frank Miller, his parents' wedding anniversary. He didn't end up seeing the show, and before he could even get past security, he was informed that he was in fact banned for life from the venue and all other properties owned by Madison Square Garden. After scanning his ticket and promptly being pulled aside by security, Miller was told by his staff that he was barred from the MSG properties for an incident at the Garden in 2021. But Miller says he hasn't been to the venue in nearly 2 decades. He was baffled at first, then it dawned on him this was probably about a t-shirt he designed years ago. MSG Entertainment won't say what happened with Miller or how he was picked out of the crowd, but he suspects he was identified via controversial facial recognition systems that the company deploys at its venue. In 2017, the 1990s New York Knicks star Charles Oakley was forcibly removed from his seat near Knicks owner and Madison Square Garden CEO James Dolan. The high-profile incident later spiraled into an ongoing legal battle. For Miller, Oakley was an integral part of the 90s Knicks, he says. With his background in graphic design, he made a shirt in the style of the old team logo that read Ban Dolan, a reference to the infamous scuffle. A few years later, in 2021, a friend of Miller's wore a Ban Dolan shirt to a Knicks game and was kicked out and banned from future events. That incident spawned ESPN segments and news articles and validated what many fans saw as pettiness on Dolan and MSG's part for going after individual fans who criticized team ownership. This week, Miller wasn't wearing a Ban Dolan shirt. He wasn't even at a Knicks game. His friend who was kicked out for the shirt tagged him in social media posts as the designer when it happened, but Miller, who lives in Seattle, hadn't attended an event in New York in years. He's not sure exactly how MSG connected him to the shirt or the 2021 incident during an event he wasn't at. Miller told The Verge that until the concert, he had never actually purchased tickets to an MSG event. They were either gifts from other people or he got them through work. He said, I've been reading articles about facial recognition stuff that Dolan and MSG properties use, but I haven't been in or around the Garden outside of Penn Station to take New Jersey Transit to Newark Airport in almost 20 years now. A friend who was present made sure his parents enjoyed the show while Miller hung out at a bar nearby. He did not get a refund for his ticket. He said, I just found it comical until I was told that my mom was crying in the lobby. I was like, oh man, I ruined their anniversary with my shit talk on the internet. Memes are powerful, and so is the surveillance state. MSG Entertainment did not respond to The Verge's questions about whether facial recognition was used to identify Miller. Quote, Frank Miller Jr. made threats against an MSG executive on social media and produced and sold merchandise that was offensive in nature, unquote. An executive vice president of communications and marketing for the company said in an emailed statement, his behavior was disrespectful and disruptive and in violation of our code of conduct.
Since it's a long week, we don't want to like dive too much into each story, especially the ones that aren't like super privacy related, but we know a lot of people like, Linux laptops, and Framework is a common one. They have stopped selling some of their laptops in the US due to tariffs. So check it out if you want to see which laptop models they are in the show notes. And with that said, we're going to move on into the Brave wallet in the Brave browser, who has added shielded Zcash transactions on desktop with Android and iOS coming soon. Honestly, there's a lot more info here. Most of you might not even care about Zcash, and so I'm just willing to say that if you're interested to see Zcash in Brave Wallet and like how they're implementing it, which is actually pretty cool, check it out in the show notes.
We didn't have any research this week, so we're going to jump straight into politics. This story is making the rounds. The UK is creating a murder prediction tool to identify the people most likely to kill. Researchers are alleged to be using algorithms to analyze the information of thousands of people, including victims of crime, as they try to identify those at greatest risk of committing serious violent offenses. The scheme was originally called the Homicide Prediction Project, but its name has been changed to Sharing Data to Improve Risk Assessment. The Ministry of Justice hopes the project will help boost public safety, but campaigners have called it, quote, chilling and dystopian. State Watch says data from people not convicted of any criminal offense will be used as part of the project, including personal information about self-harm and details relating to domestic abuse. Officials strongly deny this, insisting only data about people with at least one criminal conviction has been used. The government says the project is at this stage for research only. The project, which was commissioned by the Prime Minister's office when Rishi Sunak was in power, is using data about crime from various official sources, including the Probation Service and data from the Greater Manchester Police before 2015. The types of information processed include names, dates of birth, gender and ethnicity, and a number that identifies people on the police national computer. Also to be shared and listed under special categories of personal data are health markers, which are expected to have significant predictive power, such as data relating to mental health, addiction, suicide and vulnerability, and self-harm, as well as disability.
Europe's GDPR privacy law is headed for a red tape bonfire within weeks. So they plan to present a proposal to cut back the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, in the next couple weeks. Slashing regulation is a key focus as part of an attempt to make businesses in Europe more competitive with rivals in the US, China, and everywhere else. So they're proposing to simplify the GDPR, and they plan to agree on a so-called simplification package for small and medium-sized businesses on April 16th. And the commission said previously the simplification plan will focus on reporting requirements for organizations with less than 500 people, but will not touch the underlying core objective of the GDPR regime. Adjustments could include limiting requirements to keep records of data processing activities or reforming how businesses provide data protection impact statements. Two rules seen as overly cumbersome to smaller firms.
Our next one is also out of Europe as a whole. It says Europe proposes backdoors in encrypted platforms under new security strategy. From what I can tell, this is basically just chat control being rebranded as Protect EU. While Protect EU does not yet include a detailed proposal, the official announcement outlines several key objectives as a foundation for the plan. The most intriguing and concerning aspects of Protect EU from a technological standpoint is its focus on Europol's expanded enforcement tools, which are intended to address increasingly complex criminal investigations involving digital information. The plan includes provisions for quote-unquote lawful access to data, outlining a technology roadmap that targets encryption and evaluates the EU's current data retention rules. Granting Europol the ability to access encrypted data can only mean one thing. Brussels is proposing some form of government-mandated backdoor for communication platforms protected by end-to-end encryption. They say it remains to see how the EU plans to move forward with its encryption-breaking ambitions, though expectations for practical or effective outcomes are low. Meanwhile, the initiative also includes proposals to strengthen digital infrastructure, tighten regulations against organized crime networks, and expand international cooperation, particularly with Latin America and the Mediterranean region.
Kind of an update to the end-to-end encryption stuff. UK's demand for Apple backdoor should not be heard in secret, says court. So the UK government has lost its bid to keep secret the details of a surveillance order it brought against Apple. So the decision means that parts of the legal case will be held in public despite objections from the UK government. In the ruling on Monday, the judges said they do not accept that the revelation of the bare details of the case would be damaging to the public interest or prejudicial to national security. This is the first public acknowledgement that the case exists, though specific details of the case were withheld.
The next one is real quick from London. The London mayor has axed the cybercrime victim support line. The service, which was shut down on Tuesday, a couple Tuesdays ago, I think at this point, assisted victims of fraud, revenge porn, and cyberstalking to protect their digital identity. During its 18 months of operation, it led to 2,060 cases being opened. The helpline was launched in 2023 as a one-year pilot scheme with $220,000 in funding from the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. and was later extended by 6 months. Conservative London Assembly member Emma Best said an informal evaluation showed the helpline was working and was going to be extended for another year. However, Sadiq Khan said that the scheme would be closed. He said, "It was a pilot, and pilots are what they say on the tin. We will receive an end-of-project report. We have collected the data, and the results of the report will inform our future work."
Trump fires head of National Security Agency and Cyber Command, and this is Ha, who's a career military official, led the NSA and the US's main wiretapping and intelligence gathering agency for little more than a year after his appointment in February 2024, and he oversaw Cyber Command. And the Washington Post, which first reported this, said the firings come after right-wing activist Laura Loomer advocated for Ha's firing, along with several other national security officials, during a meeting with President Donald Trump in the Oval Office. NSA's Deputy Director Wendy Noble, who served as the agency's top civilian leader, was also let go. It's not clear who is currently overseeing the NSA and Cyber Command following Ha's firing.
Trump has ordered a federal investigation into former CISA director Chris Krebs, who was actually the first director of CISA, if I remember correctly. In a new executive order, Trump instructed the Department of Homeland Security, which houses CISA, and the U.S. Attorney General to investigate Krebs, who was fired by the Trump administration in November 2020, soon after he publicly debunked Trump's claims that there were voting irregularities during the presidential election. The order also revokes Krebs' security clearance. The executive order claims, among other things, that Krebs, quote, falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen, including by inappropriately and categorically dismissing widespread election malfeasance and serious vulnerabilities with the voting machines, unquote. The order also strips anyone who works at SentinelOne, which is the cybersecurity company that Krebs now works at, of their security clearances.
Arkansas has a social media age verification law, which was blocked by a federal judge. So they're the second state after Utah to pass an age verification law for social media in 2023. And this act requires companies to verify the games of users under 18 and get permission from their parents. The law was challenged by NetChoice, which is a lobbying group representing the tech industry, whose membership includes Meta, Snap, X, Reddit, and YouTube. NetChoice has also challenged laws restricting social media access in Utah, Texas, and California. In a ruling, the judge said that the law, known as Act 689, was overly broad, and that it's also a content-based restriction on speech, and is not targeted to address the harms the state has identified. Arkansas takes a hatchet to adults and minors' protected speech alike, though the Constitution demands it use a scalpel. It's not clear if they're going to appeal, so this might still be appeals, and even with NetChoice's latest victory, it seems that age verification laws are unlikely to go away anytime soon. Utah passed theirs, and a Texas law requiring porn sites to conduct age verification is currently before the Supreme Court, so this is still unfolding.
Florida's new social media bill says the quiet part out loud and demands an encryption backdoor. So this comes from EFF, so it's a little bit biased, but I'm mostly sharing this as a signal boost. And this is literally the opening line. At least Florida's SB 868/HB 743, quote, social media use by minors bill, isn't beating around the bush when it states that it would require, quote, social media platforms to provide a mechanism to decrypt end-to-end encryption when law enforcement obtains a subpoena, unquote. Usually these sorts of sweeping mandates are hidden behind smoke and mirrors, but this time it's out in the open. Florida wants a backdoor into any end-to-end encrypted social media platform that allows accounts for minors. This would likely lead to companies not offering encryption to minors at all, making them less safe. End-to-end encryption. Law enforcement can and does already conduct plenty of investigations involving encrypted messages, and even with end-to-end encryption, law enforcement can potentially access the content of most messages on the sender or receiver's devices, particularly when they have access to the physical device. The bill includes measures prohibiting minors from accessing any sort of ephemeral messaging features like view once options or disappearing messages. But even with those features, users can still report messages or save them. Targeting specific features does nothing to protect the security of minors, but it would potentially harm the privacy of everyone. This bill radically expands the scope of Florida's social media law HB3, which passed last year and itself has not yet been fully implemented as it currently faces lawsuits challenging its constitutionality. The state was immediately sued after the law's passage, with challengers arguing that the law is an unconstitutional restriction on protected free speech. That lawsuit is ongoing and it should be a warning sign. Florida should stop coming up with bad ideas that can't be implemented.
Apple was hit with a $162 million French antitrust fine over privacy tool. This is for abusing its dominant position in mobile app advertising on its devices via the privacy control. So this has to do with the app tracking transparency toggle, which we've talked about a ton. Essentially, like, do you want this app to track you? They're attacking that feature and saying that the allegation is that the iPhone maker went overboard in its implementation of pop-up messages that let users consent to or reject tracking that third-party applications use for targeted advertising. They told reporters that the regulators had not spelled out how Apple should change its app, but that it was up to the company to make sure it now complied with the ruling.
Irish regulator investigates X overuse of EU personal data to train Grok AI. The inquiry will look at the processing of personal data compromised in publicly accessible posts posted on the Twitter social media platform by EU and EEA users for the purposes of training generative artificial intelligence models. This decision follows a court case last year in which the Irish regulator sought an order to restrict Twitter from processing the data of EU users for the purposes of developing its AI system. X/Twitter has agreed to stop training its AI system using personal data collected from EU users before they had the option to withdraw their consent. The Irish regulator ended its court proceeding weeks later, saying X had agreed to the limits on a permanent basis.
All right, the last political news, NOIB, which is a digital rights organization, they have taken Swedish tax authority to court for selling people's personal data. In most countries, the government knows where you're born, your social security number, where you live, how much you earn, and how much your house is worth. Sweden is a bit different. There, the tax authority doesn't just use this information for administrative purposes, but sells it to data brokers who publish it online. This is a violation of EU law, and earlier this year, a Swedish data subject asked the country's tax authority to stop selling his data. The country's Supreme Court has recently ruled that freedom of information and privacy rights must be balanced and data must be marked as confidential if the recipient is likely to process it in conflict with the GDPR. The tax authority rejected the request, claiming it simply follows the Swedish constitutional principle of transparency rather than the ruling by the Supreme Court. NOIB now takes the authority to court.
That'll take us into the FOSS, and we actually didn't have any misfits this week, so this will be our last section. This first one, I think is pretty big news. Thunderbird has announced Thundermail and Thunderbird Pro services. This is the part of the blog post where they explain how this works. So they said, first, a point of clarification. Thunderbird, the email app, is and always will be free. We will never place features that can be delivered through the Thunderbird app behind a paywall. If something can be done directly on your device, it should be. However, there are things that can't be done on your computer or phone that many people have come to expect from their email suite. This is what we are setting out to solve with our cloud-based services. All of these new services are or soon will be open source software under true open source licenses. So first off, they are announcing Appointment, which is a scheduling tool that allows you to send a link to someone, allowing them to pick a time on your calendar to meet. It is currently in closed beta, and we are letting more users in each day. Send is an end-to-end encrypted file sharing service that allows you to upload large files to the service and share links to download those files with others. Many Thunderbird users have expressed interest in the ability to share large files in a privacy-respecting way, and it was a problem we were eager to solve. Thunderbird Send is the rebirth of Firefox Send. Thunderbird Send is currently in alpha testing and will move to a closed beta very soon. Assist is an experiment developed in partnership with Flower AI, a flexible open source framework for scalable, privacy-preserving federated learning that will enable users to take advantage of AI features. The hope is that processing can be done on device that can support the models, and for devices that are not powerful enough to run the language models locally, we are making use of the Flower confidential remote compute in order to ensure private remote processing, very similar to Apple's private cloud compute. Given some users' sensitivity to this, these types of features will always be optional and something that users will have to opt into. As a reminder, Thunderbird will never train AI with your data. The repo for Assist is not public yet, but it will be soon. Thundermail is an email service, including calendars and contacts. No ads, no selling or training AI on your data, just your email, and it is your email. The email domain for Thundermail will be thundermail.com or tb.pro. Additionally, you will be able to bring your own domain on day one of the service. They said at the beginning there will be paid subscription plans at a few different tiers. Once we have a sufficiently strong base of paying users to sustainably support our services, we plan to introduce a limited free tier to the public. You see this with other providers. Limitations are standard as free email and file sharing are prone to abuse.
A new security fund has opened up to help protect the Fediverse. So a nonprofit focused on bringing governance to open source projects is called the Nivenly Foundation, and they announced the launch of a new security fund that will pay those who responsibly disclose security vulnerabilities that affect Fediverse apps and services. We've already helped a few projects out, and it's looking like they're trying to distribute small payouts to anybody else who finds vulnerabilities in the wild. So the payouts will total $250 for vulnerabilities with a severity score of 7 to 8.9, and $500 for more critical vulnerabilities with a CVSS score of 9.0 or greater. The funds for the payouts come from the foundation, which is supported directly by members, which includes individuals as well as other trade organizations.
All right, and our last story this week is just a quick one for all the FOSS nerds. Coreboot 25.03 released with support for 22 more motherboards. For those who don't know, Coreboot is an open source firmware, and for those who don't know, firmware is the software that runs on the motherboard of your device that kicks in before even the operating system boots up. They have now added 22 more motherboards supported. As usual, a number of the targets are for newer Google Chromebook devices. There's also support for the AMD Crater development platform that was used for Renoir. I don't know how to pronounce that. Renoir. Renoir socks, a number of old AS Rock motherboards for Haswell era processors, and some new Star Labs devices, as well as Nova Custom, who Henry, I think, did a review of recently. Also of note is the Intel PTL RVP, I don't know what that is, edition, that is a reference platform for next-gen Panther Lake. There we go. And then, of course, the article has a full list of all 22 such motherboards. That was all we had this week. So Microsoft is cracking down on Windows 11 local accounts, but they're already back. Minority Report is becoming real. Some good news on the Apple iCloud backdoor court case, much more. It was a busy couple of weeks. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Just a reminder that our sponsor this week is SimpleX. They are a security and privacy first end-to-end encrypted messenger with no unique identifiers at all. No phone numbers, not even for sign up, no email, no nothing. They are fully open source. They are audited. They are decentralized. You can host your own server if you'd like. They are cross-platform for iOS and Android. They are also available on alternative app stores like F-Droid. You can download it directly as an APK, and there are desktop releases in beta. They are focused on strong community features like large groups. They are trying to recreate your experience from things like Telegram or WhatsApp, but they are trying to provide even more privacy and security. They do allow for files and media. And we do have a business address where you can contact us there and a private group for patrons. Just again, we do want to remind you guys, they are currently making a push on usability. They are aware that there are some shortcomings. They are trying their best to address them. Just keep that in mind as you're using it. At this time, it may be a tough sell to get your friends and family on, for example, but they are aware of where those shortcomings are and they are trying to address them. Thank you all for listening to the Surveillance Report. Links to all the stories found in the show notes. As always, if you have a story that you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing, as always, please share the podcast around. We do not pay for any kind of marketing or any kind of ads. We rely entirely on word of mouth, and sometimes the YouTube algorithm blesses us with its opaque magic and we get some new subscribers, but it's mostly up to you guys. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to keep updated on this stuff. Give us a rating if you're listening on a platform where that's an option. It really does help out. And we are trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and every little bit helps us do that. So thank you again for listening, and we will be back next week.